mollusks. It's probably the easiest one to understand why they're classified the way they are, because the name makes pretty good sense. So if you look at the word, bi means two, and then valve refers to shell. Each half of the shell is referred to a valve. So you can see they have two parts to their shell. So when you think of a mollusk, if you can picture one that has two shell halves, it's probably a bivalve. In this group, some of the more common ones you might know of are clams, scallops, and oysters. And interestingly enough, these are also ones that are commonly eaten as well. As I said earlier, the major thing that gets you classified in this group is the fact that you have two parts to your shell, two halves or valves. What's kind of interesting about this group is they're all filter feeders. So this is one way they're different from most other mollusks. They take in water, they run it past their gills, and they absorb little particles from the water they might need. So this is one group that doesn't have that radula we looked at last time, that sharp little tongue. They do not have that because they do filter feed. What they use to filter feed is something called an in-current and ex-current siphon, and I'll show you that on the next page. But essentially they're little tubes that allow the clam or scallop to take in water, move it past their gills and digestive system, and then release the water out that ex-current siphon. What we have pictured here, we have a clam over here, and this is actually a giant clam, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Then here we have a scallop. One reason scallops are kind of interesting is they have little eye spots on their shell. So all those little blue dots are actually little versions of an eye. Okay, so I thought this was kind of an interesting way to look at it. This is a diagram over here that shows kind of a drawing of like your typical clam. And over here it shows what they actually look like on the inside if you were to like dissect them. So you can see they have the mantle. Remember, that's the part that allows them to make the shell. They have a foot, so it's shown here and here. And these guys are going to use that foot to dig down into the sand or soil because they'll bury themselves. Okay, and then water is going to move past their gills, and their digestive system is tied into that as well. And if you look at this diagram, you can see an in-current and ex-current siphon. And those are going to be what takes the water in and what moves it out. And then if you've ever actually found a clam, maybe like in a pond or a lake, you try to pry it apart, you probably noticed that was somewhat difficult, and that's because there's a muscle that holds these two shell parts together. It's very, very strong, and it makes it difficult to actually pry that shell open. Okay, a lot of these are found in the ocean, but we do have a few freshwater species of clams that can be found in ponds and lakes. Like most mollusks, they do have an open circulatory system. So if you remember the blood, they still have a heart that pumps, but it also pumps into some open spaces. As I said on the last slide, they have a ligament that holds the shell parts together. That's one way they can protect themselves. And then as you see in this video that actually started playing a little bit ago, there's one bivalve that's capable of movement on its own. And the only one that is the scallop. The others can kind of use their foot to dig down into the sand or soil, but the scallops can actually move, and you'll see that in this little video here. So that's the scallop. It actually moves by opening and closing those two valves, and it can move around the water. So I'll show you that one more time. So he's kind of touching it to get it going. And then, yeah, those two valves will open and shut. So here are a few examples of organisms in this group. When I see you guys on Wednesday, we'll actually look at some videos and discuss these more in depth. But again, here we have the giant clam. And the giant clam is the largest bivalve. They can weigh up to 400 pounds. And they actually have algae that lives in this outer part of the mantle right here, and that's what colors it blue. Here we have an oyster. So if you've ever eaten an oyster, that's actually what the shell looks like. Here we have some razor clams. So they have this long shell, but I picked these because if you look at the picture carefully, you can see the foot there and there. And then over here we have mussels. Mussels are another bivalve, and again one that's pretty commonly eaten. And the final thing I wanted to talk about with bivalves was pearls. Okay, so if you remember, I said that bivalves can make pearls. The way they do it in nature is they get a little bit of sand that's stuck in the mantle. And then as the mollusk grows, their shell typically grows with them. And so this little bit of sand or a dead organism gets in their mantle and it bugs them. And so as this oyster or clam is making their shell, they often will release that inner layer. It's called mother of pearl. They release it in layers around that little piece of matter that's bugging them, and that's how a pearl's created. Most of the pearls that you would buy are now made at pearl farms, where they actually put like little beads inside the mantle of an oyster. The ones that are found in nature, though, still tend to cost more because they're more rare. And over here, this is a pearl too, even though it probably doesn't look like one. All bivalves, most of them can still make a pearl, it's just we don't necessarily want to buy their pearl. So this is the largest pearl that's made. You can see it is not shiny because it's made by a species that doesn't really release that shiny layer. So this is one that's made by a giant clam, and this is the largest pearl that we have ever found. So that kind of summarizes your bivalves. Remember today, guys, after you've watched this video and taken notes on it, you want to go out and find some sites that give you more information about bivalves and help you answer your questions.